Finding plastics in our bodies. New research from the Society of Toxicology is revealing buildup of microplastics in the reproductive organs of men. So think about the men in your life, because this is really concerning. It's leading to some serious questions. First of all, how does this impact men's fertility and overall health? Well, joining us this morning with more insight is Texas health urologist, Dr. Parth Shah. Dr. Shah, thank you for being here this morning. We just were talking in the commercial break. You got here right before the storms came over, so perfect timing. You might have to hang out with us a little bit longer until they pass. But let's talk about this, because a lot of people are probably hearing this for the first time. How is it that microplastics are finding their way into men's reproductive organs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's more important to understand what they are, how they're created, and then essentially how they get in, because all that is tied together.
Yeah.
So microplastics occur due to breakdown of all these single-use plastic products that we're so acclimated to, right? The bottles, the packaging, things that bring convenience to our lives.
Just about everything we pack in a plastic container.
Exactly.
Most times. Okay.
And so it's the exposure to these products, not only in the development, but also their breakdown. And essentially these are products that get broken down, and over time they just get smaller and smaller. And we get exposed to them through essentially living, right?
Yeah.
Eating, breathing, drinking, even certain skin products have these microplastics that are there. And all this absorption into the bloodstream leads to deposition into different tissues, especially tissues of the endocrine function, like the testes and perhaps ovaries as well.
Okay, so with that being said, obviously there are things we need to be paying attention to in terms of consumption. If we haven't been paying attention to consumption, what are some of the symptoms that may pop up that may signal, hey, you've got a microplastics issue?
Sure, and so the issue is not as clear cut, and because there's a lot of overlap in symptoms, so we think a lot of the plastic breakdown byproducts disrupt the hormonal delicate balance that we have. And so that means we get more and more men with symptoms of low testosterone, and these would be symptoms like decreased energy, fatigue, central abdominal body weight, low sex drive, and all those symptoms. So again, there's a lot of non-specific symptoms, but if we are experiencing them, then seeking out care, at least evaluation for them, would be important.
And asking questions, because you may go to your doctor and they may not be thinking microplastics. We weren't thinking this before we had this conversation probably. And you mentioned women and ovaries. What are some of the things that women need to look out for in terms of recognizing symptoms or...
Sure. And so again, so far all the studies that have been done in humans looking at certain organs, we found microplastics are within all of the organs. Now, ovaries have not been specifically studied, so can't postulate that, but again, the trends holding consistent, we would expect to find some impact there. So again, the concern being more of a fertility standpoint, again, that's the function of ovaries in terms of fertility, so that would be the concern.
Well, it looks as though we all need to pay attention in terms of the plastics and what we're using, what we're choosing. Just to kind of mitigate it on the front end in terms of preventative care. Are there any treatments or are there any interventions that are available right now if we do have elevated levels of these plastics?
And so this is such a new development, right? Even though these plastics have been around for decades, we have not really been privy to understand the impact, nor have we looked. So now that we're looking and finding the development, really prevention is the biggest key in terms of exposure. In the study you mentioned, they found that both humans and dogs, they're looking comparables, had microplastics built up in their testes, and they found that humans were 3 times more likely to have this exposure, and so increased levels in our bodies. So again, the biggest takeaway from all this is really, let's stop it at the beginning. Let's decrease our exposure to decrease the harm potentially downstream for us.
And you mentioned something really important, that there's more research being done.
Absolutely.
So there's going to be, I'm sure, more data coming out and hopefully more intervention and more treatments.
Exactly. Science is sometimes clunky, it's slow, but it's systematic. And so essentially we're making a good case that these chemicals are there, they're building up, there's an impact, and we see it through our fertility rates in the Western world, right? And they're dropping. And so this is one of the impacts of microplastics in our bodies, and more to come, but absolutely.
Dr. Parth, thank you so much. This has been such a critical conversation for all of us this morning.
Well, appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks.
All right. Still to come, a